Hi, I'm David Cole. I teach constitutional law at Georgetown, and I'm the author of a book called The Torture Memos. I want to make it clear I'm not the author of the torture memos themselves, but tonight I will be reading from one of those torture memos, impersonating a person some of you may have heard of named John Yoo, who is infamous for writing the first torture memo. And you know, it's not great to have to read from the views of a torturer, but Art has to read from the views of a terrorist, so I'm not sure which is a better choice.
Hi, I'm Art Spiegelman. I'll be reading excerpts of Abu Zubaydah's first-hand account of his interrogation in a secret CIA prison. Abu Zubaydah's testimony is included in a report by the International Committee for the Red Cross about the treatment of detainees in U.S. custody.
You have asked for this office's views on whether certain proposed conduct would violate the prohibition against torture found at Section 2340A of Title 18 of the United States Code. You have asked us for this advice in the course of conducting interrogations of Abu Zubaydah. In light of the information you believe Zubaydah has and the high level of threat you believe now exists, you wish to move the interrogation into what you have described as increased pressure phase. This phase will likely last no more than several days, but could last up to 30 days.
About 2.5 or 3 months after I arrived in this place, the interrogation began again, but with more intensity than before. Then the real torturing started.
In this phase, you would like to employ 10 techniques that you believe will dislocate his expectations regarding the treatment he believes he will receive and encourage him to disclose the crucial information mentioned above. These 10 techniques are 1. Attention grasp, 2. Walling, 3. Facial hold, 4. Facial slap, insult slap, 5. Cramped confinement, 6. Wall standing, 7. Stress positions, 8. Sleep deprivation, 9. Insects placed in a confinement box, and 10. The waterboard. You have informed us that you expect these techniques to be used in some sort of escalating fashion, culminating with the waterboard, though not necessarily ending with this technique.
2 black wooden boxes were brought into the room outside my cell. One was tall, slightly higher than me, and narrow, measuring perhaps 1 meter by 3/4 of a meter and 2 meters in height. The other was shorter, perhaps only 1 meter in height. I was taken out of my cell, and one of the interrogators wrapped a towel around my neck. They then used it to swing me around and smash me repeatedly against the hard walls of the room. I was also repeatedly slapped in the face. As I was still shackled, the pushing and pulling around meant that the shackles pulled painfully on my ankles.
Cramped confinement involves the placement of the individual in a confined space, the dimensions of which restrict the individual's movement. The confined space is usually dark. The duration of confinement varies based on the size of the container. For the larger confined space, the individual can stand up or sit down. The smaller space is large enough for the subject to sit down. Confinement to the larger space can last up to 18 hours. For the smaller space, confinement lasts for no more than 2 hours.
I was then put into the tall box for what I think was about 1.5 to 2 hours. The box was totally black on the inside as well as the outside. It had a bucket inside to use as a toilet and had water to drink provided in a bottle. They put a cloth of cover over the outside of the box to cut out the light and restrict my air supply. It was difficult to breathe.
For walling, a flexible false wall will be constructed. The individual is placed with his heels touching the wall. The interrogator pulls the individual forward and then quickly and firmly pushes the individual into the wall. It is the individual's shoulder blades that hit the wall. During this motion, the head and neck are supported with a rolled hood or towel that provides a C-collar effect to help prevent whiplash. To further reduce the probability of injury, the individual is allowed to rebound from the flexible wall. You have orally informed us that the false wall is in part constructed to create a loud sound when the individual hits it, which will further shock or surprise the individual. In part, the idea is to create a sound that will make the impact seem far worse than it is, and that will be far worse than any injury that might result from the action.
When I was let out of the box, I saw that one of the walls of the room had been covered with plywood sheeting. From now on, it was against this wall that I was then smashed with the towel around my neck. I think that the plywood was there to provide some absorption of the impact of my body. The interrogators realized that smashing me against the hard wall would probably quickly result in physical injury. During these torture sessions, many guards were present, plus 2 interrogators who did the actual beating, still asking questions, which the main interrogator left to return when the beating was over. After the beating, I was then placed in the small box. They placed a cloth or cover over the box to cut out all light and restrict my air supply. As it was not high enough even to sit upright, I had to crouch down. It was very difficult because of my wounds. The wound on my leg began to open and started to bleed. I don't know how long I remained in the small box. I think I may have slept or maybe fainted.
Finally, you would like to use a technique called the waterboard. In this procedure, the individual is bound securely to an inclined bench, which is approximately 4 feet by 7 feet. The individual's feet are generally elevated. A cloth is placed over the forehead and eyes. Water is then applied to the cloth in a controlled manner. As this is done, the cloth is lowered until it covers the nose and mouth. Once the cloth is saturated and completely covers the mouth and nose, airflow is slightly restricted for 20 to 40 seconds due to the presence of the cloth. This causes an increase in carbon dioxide level in the individual's blood. This increase in the carbon dioxide level stimulates increased effort to breathe. This effort, plus the cloth, produce the perception of suffocation and incipient panic, i.e., the perception of drowning. During those 20 to 40 seconds, water is continuously applied from a height of 12 to 24 inches. After this period, the cloth is lifted and the individual is allowed to breathe unimpeded for 3 or 4 full breaths. The sensation of drowning is immediately relieved by the removal of the cloth. The procedure may then be repeated. The water is usually applied from a canteen cup or small watering can with a spout. You have orally informed us that this procedure triggers an automatic physiological sensation of drowning that the individual cannot control, even though he may be aware that he is in fact not drowning. You have also orally informed us that it is likely that this procedure would not last more than 20 minutes in any one application.
I was then dragged from the small box, unable to walk properly, and put on what looked like a hospital bed and strapped down very tightly with belts. A black cloth was then placed over my face, and the interrogators used a mineral water bottle to pour water on the cloth so that I could not breathe. After a few minutes, the cloth was removed and the bed was rotated into an upright position. The pressure of the straps on my wounds was very painful. I vomited. The bed was then again lowered to a horizontal position, and the same torture carried out again with the black cloth over my face and water poured on from a bottle. On this occasion, my head was in a more backward, downward position, and the water was poured on for a longer time. I struggled against the straps, trying to breathe, but it was hopeless. I thought I was going to die. I lost control of my urine. Since then, I still lose control of my urine when under stress.
In order for pain or suffering to rise to the level of torture, the statute requires that it be severe. Although the confinement boxes, both small and large, are physically uncomfortable because their size restricts movement, they are not so small as to require the individual to contort his body to sit, small box, or stand, large box. You have also orally informed us that despite his wound, Zubaydah remains quite flexible, which would substantially reduce any pain associated with being placed in the box. The facial slap and walling contain precautions to ensure that no pain, even approaching severe pain, results. The slap is delivered with fingers slightly spread, which you have explained to us is designed to be less painful than a closed hand slap. The slap is also delivered to the fleshy part of the face, further reducing any risk of physical damage or serious pain. Likewise, walling involves quickly pulling the person forward and then thrusting him against a flexible false wall. You have informed us that the sound of hitting the wall will actually be far worse than any possible injury to the individual. The use of the rolled towel around the neck also reduces the risk of injury. While it may hurt to be pushed against the wall, any pain experienced is not of the intensity associated with serious physical injury.
I was then placed again in the tall box. While I was inside the box, loud music was played again, and somebody kept banging repeatedly on the box from the outside. I tried to sit down on the floor, but because of the small space, the bucket with urine tipped over and spilt over me. I remained in the box for several hours, maybe overnight. I was then taken out, and again a towel was wrapped around my neck, and I was smashed into the wall with the plywood covering and repeatedly slapped in the face by the same two interrogators as before. I was then made to sit on the floor with a black hood over my head until the next session of torture began.
As we understand it, when the waterboard is used, the subject's body responds as if the subject were drowning, even though the subject may be well aware that he is in fact not drowning. You have informed us that this procedure does not inflict actual physical harm. Thus, although the subject may experience the fear or panic associated with the feeling of drowning, the waterboard does not inflict physical pain. As we explained in the Section 2340A memorandum, pain and suffering, as used in Section 2340, is best understood as a single concept, not distinct concepts of pain as distinguished from suffering. The waterboard, which inflicts no pain or actual harm whatsoever, does not, in our view, inflict severe pain or suffering. Even if one were to parse the statute more finely to attempt to treat suffering as a distinct concept, the waterboard could not be said to inflict severe suffering. The waterboard is simply a controlled acute episode, lacking the connotation of a protracted period of time generally given to suffering.
This went on for approximately 1 week. During this time, the whole procedure was repeated 5 times. On each occasion, apart from one, I was suffocated once or twice and was put in the vertical position on the bed in between. On one occasion, the suffocation was repeated 3 times. I vomited each time I was put in the vertical position between the suffocation. During that week, I was not given any solid food. I was only given Ensure to drink. My head and beard were shaved every day. I collapsed and lost consciousness on several occasions. Eventually, the torture was stopped by the intervention of the doctor. I was told during this period that I was one of the first to receive these interrogation techniques, so no rules applied. I felt like they were experimenting and trying out techniques to be used later on other people.